On today's show, we'll discuss how Nigeria can tap into its blue economy. As always, you can join the conversation with the hashtag that's Beyond Markets. You can also follow my Twitter handle too, at Esther Ubodaga. Now, the arrival of Total Egina FPSO vessel was a first for Nigeria's ports, as this is the largest vessel to berth in West Africa. Hadiza Bala Usman, Managing Director of the Nigerian Ports Authority, joins me in the studio as we delve into ways to tap into the country's blue economy through its ports. Hadiza, thank you so much. Pleasure to have you on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
Now let's start with Total's Egina's FPSO. Worth about $3.3 billion US, the first of its kind. We actually saw it in a passing by our office the day it arrived, and it was quite huge. And I thought to myself, wow, this could be a game changer. But share your thoughts in terms of how the impact this could have on port activities and even the economy in general.
It is a huge achievement for Nigeria to have the vessel come into our waterways. We have, I would say, multiplier effects around the arrival of the Egina FPSO. For the oil and gas industry, it's evident to everyone that the largest FPSO that's ever come to Africa is coming to Nigeria. And to the extent that we're able to have this magnitude of exploration still going on in our country in spite of the perceived security challenge. So on the one side, that is a huge achievement we've been able to portray to the world. And when you look at also the local content, 70% of the Egina will be fabricated in Nigeria. So the Egina FPSO would be at Ladol, and fabrication over 6 months will be done here. So there's a huge, I'll say, escalation of what can be done in Nigeria that would show our capacity, all our engineers, the Nigerian people, and indeed the level of services that are required now. The world will know Nigeria can provide that.
Now, speaking about the work, because I knew that before now, perception differed from, especially for those looking from the outside, foreign investors, saying that do they have the infrastructure to support that? Do they have the capacity?
Yes.
We hear of so much graft, we hear of inefficiencies, we hear of leakages. So for this to happen now, what kind of mindset do you think this message will
send to the world that Nigeria is really right up there in terms of the oil and gas industry for the ports themselves? Because when you look at the size, it shows that we have done a very extensive maintenance of our channels. Our waterways are deep enough. We have the required equipment. We have the required tugboats that would tow in the vessel. So it shows that Nigeria has the infrastructure, has the manpower, has the skill set to host such a huge venture into the oil and gas industry.
So are you expecting more of this to happen?
Yes, actually, in discussion with
something in the pipe.
Yeah. There are quite a few, and we would want to see this becoming a regular occurrence, so that we have an FPSO of this size coming into our waterways within. So it's not to say that this is a one-off, but Nigeria is receiving and would continue to receive such.
But with the MP on its part, would you also be scaling up? Because if we're going to have, I mean, this is just one. It's the biggest so far. If we're going to have others of this size and magnitude, I'm thinking perhaps infrastructure also needs to be looked at and upscaled.
We actually have ready infrastructure that can accommodate the FPSO. Our terminals in Onne have the capacity to take on large FPSOs in this way. So it's more to do with ensuring that we attract the market. We boost the confidence of parties to know that can be done. So no matter what you say in terms of communicating your capacity, it's better when people see, yes, it has been done. Yes, the FPSO has come. It is berthed successfully. Fabrication is being done. And then you know that, yes, Nigeria is the destination.
Okay, great stuff. Now, you've been Managing Director of the NPA for a year and 6 months. So let's talk about 2017 highlights from last year. A lot was said about, the state of the port. We had certain issues, certain headlines in the newspapers, the trucks, tankers, the traffic, congestion. And, these are issues that we hear, year in, year out. So I'm just wondering, what was it that you would say was different last year, maybe from a policy perspective, that the authorities of the NPA took to help change things?
We had sought to deploy SOPs across the board. So we have standard operations procedure for quite a lot of our port activities, which enables the private sector and indeed all stakeholders to see what our services are and how we provide them. We deployed all manners of transparency across our systems, whereby all services that are required by MPA are put out in our notice boards, are put out on the website, so you can see the processes for any permit, any licensing. You're able to actually know the required documentation and the timeline with which to do that.
Sorry, are you referring to the standard operating procedure that was launched last year, the SOP and the PSSP?
Okay, yes, that's among one of the SOPs that were launched, which further institutes transparency, further seeks to remove corruption within our procedures. So we had worked within the within the committee that had been mandated to deploy the SOP on transparency and accountability, which cuts across ICPC, TUGA, Nigerian Shippers Council, to see how we can integrate and sustain transparency within our systems.
But what would you say was the biggest achievement last year for the Ports Authority?
Our biggest achievement to do with our revenue, we've been able to generate 299.6 billion naira in 2017, which is an increase from what we generated in 2016. I'd also say that instituting the executive orders was also such an important thing. We sought to have a single interface for clearing of goods, which is such an important thing, whereby all agencies of government are required to domicile in one location. We've also sought to, we've instituted 24-hour port operations in Apapa. So the Apapa port operates 24 hours, which has all our services being provided, and other agencies of government are also working 24 hours.
Now, I know that, like you mentioned, the SOP, the PSSP was also launched to help curb leakages, create better efficiency and transparency. But we still had cases of, graft and, corruption. I mean, customs officials were always accused of, for instance, for example, a manufacturer wants to bring in a product and it's been certified by the Standard Organization of Nigeria, maybe in conjunction with the CBN. The value of the product has been determined in the country that it's going to take off from to come to Nigeria. But then it gets to Nigeria and then the customs decides to give it a different value, and then which results in a higher duty that the manufacturer has to pay. I heard a lot of cases about that last year. So I'm thinking, how are you addressing that?
For us to address that, we need to institute the National Single Windows, which is an automated platform that brings together all agencies of government to do all the activities within an electronic platform. It reduces human intervention in the processes. In that way, it reduces graft. For example, what you mentioned will be all automated, so it does not allow Nigerian customs or indeed any other agency of government to interfere to the extent that a documentation process starts at the point of commencing your importation of the cargo, and that documentation process, it will sees you to the end without having customs or agencies of government coming in to interfere with the process. So National Single Windows would be a game changer for our importation and exportation processes.
Is it foolproof?
Well, it would be foolproof. It takes a while to deploy, but starting it up in itself is such an important thing. So for us in 2018, the National Single Windows is a critical game changer that we seek to deploy and seek to achieve. I would also want for people to understand the role of Nigerian Ports Authority vis-a-vis other agencies of government. So for every time your cargo comes into the port location and you have challenges with clearance, everybody refers to Nigerian Ports Authority, but that is not part of our mandate. What we seek to do, or our responsibility, is to ensure that the cargo comes in through the waterways, is able to safely navigate, come to our channels, it's able to berth, it's taken out of the vessel, it's put into the location for the terminal operators, and then other agencies of government come to commence their own activities.
Okay, so when you see such headlines and hear that kind of talk, you don't want, MPH cannot be held.
Yeah, MPA is not responsible for the actions of Nigerian Customs Service, for the actions of Port Health, for the actions of SON. Our job is to ensure that all the vessels come in, they have a smooth passage, we provide security, the depth of the water is deep enough, the infrastructure, the key walls are as required, and to have the terminal operators comply in deploying the necessary equipment for cargo handling, to supervise and ensure that they do that. So really that's where our job ends. When it comes to clearing of goods, inspection of goods, it doesn't fall within the purviews of Nigerian Ports Authority.
You mentioned infrastructure. What about infrastructure? I mean, that has also been a hot topic, the state of infrastructure at the ports. How much investment is going into it? I mean, we talk about the roads leading to and out of the ports and the tankers and the congestion. And I'm just thinking, isn't there a way?
Well, just to also say that port access roads are also not under our purviews, interestingly. So everybody has a congestion coming to the ports, he just screams
But it affects you.
It affects us fundamentally.
How the public perceives the
Absolutely, to the extent that, you know, with the Apapa port access roads, Nigerian Ports Authority has provided funding to reconstruct the road, and it's really not our responsibility. We provided 1.8 billion naira for the reconstruction of Wharf Road in partnership with some private sector agencies.
When was this?
Last year. So we're working with Federal Ministry of Works on reconstruction of 2 kilometers of road in Apapa in partnership with Dangote and Flour Mills. So just to say, port access roads are not our responsibility, but because of how important it is to us, we are providing funding for something that is not our responsibility. And indeed, we have sustained our engagement with Ministry of Works on the need to ensure that the roads are rehabilitated. We even believe that we might need to declare an emergency on port access roads, because what is going on now in the Apapa Tinkan Island is an emergency. We believe if the Ministry of Works does not consider these roads priority, the Nigerian ports through the Ministry of Transportation can take on these roads and reconstruct them.
Okay, so you have the capacity, you have the,
you
have the financial.
Yeah, we will be able to source, because it's important to us. So we will be able to source for funding and financing to reconstruct those roads.
At what point would you say to yourself, you know what, this is, first of all, does it hurt your revenues?
It absolutely
hurts our revenues. Okay, so at what point would the NPA say, you know what, enough is enough, we will take the bull by the horns and we'll fix this road ourselves?
We are going through, we need to go through submission and request to the Ministry of Works, requesting that we would like to take over those roads. And we have initiated the process to say, what are you doing on this road? What is the status of prioritizing these roads in 2018? To the extent that Ministry of Works cannot confirm that they will reconstruct these roads in 2018, we want to take them over and reconstruct them, because it's an emergency. We have a situation where importation of fish has been reduced by over 70% because of that congestion. We also have an instance of a trailer park that is in the Tinkan Island area that is critical to our congestion issue, and that trailer park is also being reconstructed by Federal Ministry of Works, and they've been unable to complete the construction of that trailer park for years now. So we've also asked the Ministry of Works, can you please hand over this trailer park to us so we can conclude its reconstruction and hand over to private sector to manage.
I'm sure many people listening would say, you know what, just go ahead.
Yes.
Just fix the road and make everybody's...
The bureaucratic process just makes it a bit challenging.
Make all our lives better.
Yes, are keen to take on responsibility that might not be ours, but
I mean, if it hurts your revenues...
Exactly. Whatever seeks to reduce our revenues or to make our ports uncompetitive, we will go the extra mile to address those issues, even if they're not directly under our purviews.
Okay, Hadiza, we need to take a quick break. Thank you for your time so far. We'll come back and pick up from where we left off. I've been speaking to Hadiza, Managing Director, Nigerian Ports Authority. As we continue our discussion on how Nigeria can tap into its blue economy, still with me is Hadiza Bala Usman, Managing Director of the Nigerian Ports Authority. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Now let's move on. Let's talk about this much publicized, dispute, as it were, between the NPA and Intels. We understand it's been resolved. Tell us about that.
One of the issues we've had with the Intels is the non-compliance to TSA. As you're aware, the Nigerian government instituted the Treasury Single Account, which is the one account that all revenues of government need to be paid into. Intels collects revenue on behalf of Nigerian Ports Authority and had refused to comply to TSA and kept retaining those revenues in their coffers. So we insisted that they must comply. No company is above the laws of the country. And we went through the whole process. We issued a notice of termination to Intels, following which they apologized and are now complying fully to TSA.
Okay, so that was the turning point, the apology that came from Intel. Yeah, because it looked as if from what, I mean, the documents I read and, following the story, it looked as if, Intel was digging its heels in and insisting on its position.
Yes.
And it looked like this wasn't going to end except in a high court or something.
Yes, Intel's understood that they couldn't keep violating the laws of the land, and they complied. I think it's important for all entities operating in an environment to adhere to the rules and regulations. What we seek to ensure is that you have a level playing field. You must comply to regulations. At no point was the Nigerian Ports Authority not going to remit their own portion of the revenues. All other third-party agreements that we have in the Nigerian Ports Authority have a similar structure. So why should Intel feel that it can operate outside of the law? The other companies are complying. Why can't you comply?
Okay, so now the contract that was ceased or terminated, it's going to be restored.
Well, it was an issue. It was a notice of termination we issued. Now we're in the process of recalling the notice of termination. We have a few financial issues we need to resolve. Between the period of 2017, Intel's collected revenues on our behalf and did not remit any monies to us. So we have an outstanding of $48 million that has not been paid by Intel's for the period 2017, which represents 30% of the total revenue that they generated on that service. So we believe these are monies that are meant for Nigeria, meant for Nigerians, and those monies needs to be given to us to remit to the TSA account.
Okay, so what is the response of Intel's on that, this money? Have they said, okay, yes, we understand, we agree, and we will pay?
They agree that they would pay. My point is you pay now. So if you look at the relationship, if we had a TSA account, this would not arise. So the monies would come to our coffers and we would pay them. But because the monies were going to their coffers, they chose to retain the monies. So how can you have a situation where a private company sits on your revenues and refuses to remit those monies to you and refuses to comply to Treasury single account? If we had TSA in place, we will not be in a situation where Intel has $48 million of government money in their coffers for 12 months and they've refused to pay. And I've also made Intel understand that we were going to charge them for interest on that money for the period it's been with them.
Okay, so obviously that is a lot more than 48.
Well, yeah, $48 million is the total, plus interest for the period that the monies have been with them.
So from what is happening now, is it that they cannot pay now and are asking for an extended period or to pay in
well, you see, these are monies that have been generated. So you have no reason to say you cannot pay. You provided a service and you were paid for it. So the monies were collected by you.
So are they saying that they cannot pay now?
Well, they're just behaving like Intel's and trying just not to pay and just being silent about it.
But there has to be something on paper.
Ignoring letters that we've written, just being silent and just saying nothing. We've written to them, we've severally notified them, we've held discussions with them that you must pay these monies, and Intel has been silent and evasive on giving a confirmed position on it.
Okay, so what action would you take if this continues? At what point are you going to say,
well,
you know what,
in this week, I'm communicating to Intel that to the extent that they do not remit these monies to us, we would not withdraw the notice of termination.
Okay, so, are you going to give them a deadline?
Yes, yeah. I'm giving them a deadline on payment that they need to make, and if they don't, the notice of termination will stand, because it is a violation of a contract agreement if you refuse to remit the monies that are meant for an agency of government.
Is there a particular date for that?
No, I haven't put the date on issuing it. Okay. So I'm giving Intel's possible 2-week window to provide that payment.
2 weeks from this week?
2 weeks from this week to provide that payment, following which the notice of termination will not be withdrawn. And just to also add that all procedures have been done, all manners of communications have been made to Intel to remit those monies.
Oh, so you can say that you have given them...
We have given them ample time and ample notice. And I keep saying that these are monies that were generated. So it's not as if I'm asking you to pay for something from your money. These are revenues that you collected for a service that you're collecting on behalf of MPA. So you cannot even say that you do not have the monies.
Okay. All right. We'll see how that pans out. Now, let's talk about the blue economy. So much has been said. I've been to different, forums, conferences, and the talk is now, there's more flesh to the talk now about how Africa should begin to develop its blue economy. We've seen the likes of Mauritius, Seychelles. Some might say that, they have no choice. that's where they get a lot of their revenue from. But for Nigeria, I'm just thinking, how are we planning to tap into our own blue economy? Is there a broad, is there a vision, is there a blueprint on how we should proceed?
There's an ongoing discussion on developing a policy on the blue economy. We believe that it's an integral part of the development of the economy in Nigeria. The Nigerian Ports Authority is putting in place and deploying infrastructure to enable the blue economy thrive, while concurrently the Ministry of Transportation is working on concluding on the policy, as it were. We believe that providing an enabling environment, just to speak about again the Egina, where we took out a monopoly. If you're aware, there was indeed a monopoly in oil and gas cargo, where the particular cargoes are designated for certain locations. And upon removal of the monopoly by this administration, we're able to liberalize the sector and permit for an Egina, for example, to come and berth in the Lagos harbour. So this is what we seek to do, to expand on our blue economy, to provide a level playing field that allows every player to choose and sort of operate in the manner that suits them, having proper competition and recognition of the statutory roles of relevant agencies of government operating in the maritime industry.
But would you say that is there an ongoing awareness now that, of what is to come and how the government, through the NPA, plans to tap into this new?
Oh, absolutely. There's ongoing stakeholder consultation on how we can prioritize our access or utilization of the blue economy. The need for us to look at our exclusive economic zone and see how we can harness on that as we seek to expand on what it is that Nigeria taps from the blue economy. We need to look at the neighboring countries and see what it is that they have that makes us competition, as it were, provides an avenue where Nigeria would have a better edge over the neighboring economies. We have seen where, for example, in the automobile industry, we have an increase in the vehicle cargo going to neighboring countries because of our tariff regime in the country. Okay. Nigeria is trying to develop its automobile industry by promoting the manufacturing. So the tariffs discourages importation, but at the same time, the automobile manufacturing might not be at the level that the Nigerian market requires, because our needs for automobile is beyond what is being assembled in Nigeria. So that creates a challenge as we see more companies importing vehicles to neighboring countries and having them smuggled into Nigeria, because Nigeria is the market, Nigeria has the numbers, Nigeria is the destination. So we need to enhance on ease of doing business, access into our waterways, ensure that it's easy for people to bring goods to our country and also easy for us to export goods. That is how we can, I'll say, actively tap on the blue economy.
Okay, now, I mean, interesting point you made there, because I know that it will be the desire of the NPA to have the ports, be the hub for, not just West Africa, but for Africa. And I know that different policy thrusts are all geared towards that. But which would you say is having the most effect in terms of getting us there, so that the world recognizes that, okay, fine, you want to bring all those ships, all those, Nigeria is a place to take them to.
When we look at the depth of our channels, the fact that our channels are able to accommodate very large vessels, which is what is going on in the shipping industry. Having huge vessels is the current trend in shipping. So Nigerian waterways have the capacity to accommodate these large vessels, and that is indeed a huge, I'll say, edge that we have in attracting bigger vessels to our waterways. We also have the, I'll say the natural market for those goods. So that is something that no matter what where you take your cargo to, Nigeria is the destination. So we have instituted all our policies on ease of doing business, and that is what would further attract, make our ports more competitive, where I would say again, our ports in Apapa are 24 hours operations. We also have our Calabar port, where you have flat bottom vessels are able to come. We had a 62,000-ton vessel come into Calabar, and that had not been done in decades. 3 of those vessels were able to come into Calabar, even with the limitation of the drafts. So we believe that as we seek to dredge Calabar ports and expand on the eastern ports, we think we need to encourage the shipping companies to use flat bottom vessels. These vessels do not require the level of draft that we had initially planned for the Calabar ports. Okay. But what matters is the vessel types that can come to limited draft locations, and those are the vessels that need to come to Calabar ports, and indeed the eastern ports that have a limited draft. So these are the things that we believe would work towards making our ports more competitive. And as I said, national single windows is something that is like critical for us, and enhancing on our intermodal transportation system for cargo evacuation, because right now you have, I'll say 90% of the cargo coming into Nigeria being evacuated by road. So our roads cannot be good. You know, the volume of tonnage that goes on the roads is so high that the roads invariably would become deteriorated. And also the access through rail is something that is important and very critical in
All right, now we have about 2 minutes left. So let me ask you, since you took over the role of Managing Director of the Nigerian Ports Authority, what would you say has been your most difficult task? What's the most difficult challenge that you've come across?
Difficulty in getting entities to comply to regulations and rules. There's an attitude of impunity. You have third-party contractors refusing to comply to regulatory positions. So this is one of the things that I've seen and I've found challenging, where people or private entities just do not recognize the rule of law. And that, I think, is completely unacceptable. While we seek to encourage private sector investment, but we have to make private sector understand there are regulations governing every activity, and they must comply.
Okay, what is your vision for the NPA? What is that one legacy you'd like to leave behind?
I would like to leave a more transparent and efficient port system.
Okay, and do you think you're already on your way to doing that?
Yes,
I imagine,
we are.
I don't know. I don't want to go into the whole gender thing. Maybe being a woman makes how it makes the job easier, more difficult for you. But would you say that you're on track to
yes,
achieving
we are.
that?
Yes, the NPA team is on track to achieve that.
All right, thank you so much, Hadiza. We're going to have to leave it there. Thank you for talking to us. It's a pleasure having you on.
Thank you for having me.
I've been speaking to Hadiza Bala Usman, the Managing Director of Nigerian Ports Authority, looking at, of course, the state of the ports, talking on different issues ranging from infrastructure and some of the challenges that she's had to go through to get the port, of course, to make it a hub on the African continent.